All right, guys, today we are continuing our post-draft rankings for the 2023 NFL Draft Class for fantasy football. Today should be a really fun one as we are ranking one of the deepest running back rooms to enter the NFL in recent history. After a wild NFL draft weekend, there's been a lot of shakeup from the pre-draft to the post-draft rankings, a lot of risers, a lot of followers for fantasy just based on the insane draft capital and landing spots. So as always, like the video, leave a comment down below, and I'll see you on the other side of that intro. Welcome back into Twin Takes Fantasy Football, and boy do we have a doozy of a video today for you. If you thought the rankings were really shaken up on the wide receiver episode, get ready for the running back episode. As I said in those pre-draft rankings, this was a draft class that was really dependent, and a position with the running backs that are very dependent on the landing spot. So with that draft capital landing spot, there was a ton of people who skyrocketed up my board and people who fell out of the top 10 completely. It's going to be an absolute fun one. I know I'm going to get a lot of pushback on some of my opinions here, but let's get into it. Number one, we'll start off really easy. A guy that was never going to change no matter what team he went to, and that's going to be Bijan Robinson. Yes, the best thing since sliced bread, basically Jesus himself coming to walk amongst us and play the game of football. He gets that top 10 draft capital, which we haven't seen for a very long time in the NFL, not since Saquon Barkley. Saquon went number 2 overall, but Bijan goes number 8 overall to the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, it's a good landing spot, but he's so landing spot agnostic that he's going to be the 101 in Superflex in 1 QB. It does not matter. Bijan is that good, and he goes into an offense that really likes to run the ball. And Arthur Smith and Arthur Blank, the Arthur brothers, they're just very infatuated with Bijan. And with the electricity that he brings to the city, it was announced earlier today that he was going to be wearing the number 7. And there was another player that played for the Falcons that was incredibly electric, won MVP. That would be the only Michael Vick. So we can only hope that Bijan has that sort of impact on the game and on the team for the Falcons. I have no doubt that he will be a running back 1 for many years to come. No question about it. Jahmyr Gibbs, jump here, rises up my draft board. I know I came in pretty hot with the pre-draft rankings. I had him ranked number 3 behind Zach Charbonnet, but with this draft capital, it is clear who the running back 2 is in this draft class. It is Jahmyr Gibbs. He goes 12 overall in the first round to the Detroit Lions, and they are so confident in Jahmyr Gibbs being their running back 1 that they traded away DeAndre Swift to the Eagles later that day. Again, there are weight concerns, there are height concerns with Jahmyr Gibbs, but I think the landing spot and the draft capital have to say everything about it. These were guys that came out, and you don't know how much of it is coach speak, but Dan Campbell and the brass over in Detroit came out and said, listen, we were comfortable taking Jahmyr Gibbs at number 6. He's our guy. He's the guy that we're going to run our offense around. He is the focal point. He's more than just a running back. He's a guy that can line up out wide, a guy that can just eviscerate opponents and take it to the house on on basically any play. I think that he's going to be heavily involved in this Detroit Lions offense. Again, something I mentioned with the quarterback video and Hendon Hooker, that they have one of the brightest young offensive minds as their offensive coordinator there in Detroit with Ben Johnson, and he's a guy that, he was a very hot head coaching candidate in the head coaching carousel this past offseason, but decided to return to Detroit despite having head coaching offers because he wanted to build something here in Detroit. I think what he's going to be able to do with Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be absolutely lethal on the football field. I think Jahmyr is a huge talent. I'm not surprised to see him going 102 overall in 1 QB leagues, and I'm okay with him at like the 104 behind AR-15 and Bryce Young in Superflex leagues. I think he is that talented, and he provides that much value to a team at the running back position. Number 3 is where we're going to get really spicy. Number 3 for me is going to be Kendre Miller, running back out of TCU. His pre-draft ranking was RB6, so he flies way up the draft board, breaking my top 3 running backs for the 2023 NFL draft class. He goes at the beginning of the 3rd round with the 6th overall pick in the 3rd round, number 71 overall, to the New Orleans Saints. And it's just a marriage of talent and landing spot. He was the 4th running back taken in the NFL draft, so it kind of tells you where the NFL values him as a running back, taking him over guys like Devin A-Chain and a Zach Evans and some of those other guys that potentially could have gone above him. But it seems that he fits those generic molds of a big bruising back in the NFL, 6 feet, 220 pounds. And I think the landing spot's going to be excellent for him. They brought in Jamal Williams, but Jamal Williams is on the older side for running back. And we know that Alvin Kamara is going to have issues with that legal scuffle he got into at the Pro Bowl, not this past year, but the year previously. It's very possible that he's actually not even on the Saints to start the year, because standard language per the NFLPA in all contracts is if there's any sort of felony or felony misdemeanor, they can terminate the contract for cause immediately without any indemnification or any other penalty. So they could potentially be waiting to see what the ruling is passed down from the judges in Las Vegas, and then the Saints can just cut him entirely and move forward with Kendre Miller and Jamal Williams. This could be, the basically heir apparent to Alvin Kamara if they move on from Alvin, and Baby comes back to an offense that we saw a few years ago that was very dynamic from the running back position. Alvin, Kendrick taking the Alvin Kamara role, and Jamal Williams taking the Mark Ingram role. So I was infatuated with Kendre Miller as a prospect, and then just draft capital in day 2 just really affirmed how much the NFL use him, and also a team in the Saints that highly values their running back. He is the clear running back 3 for me in this draft class. He's in a single quarterback league. He's a first round pick for sure. And in a super flex league, I could definitely see him being taken at the end of the first round, and I'd be okay with it. My running back 4, we're going all the way down here to Roshon Johnson. I know this is really spicy, and he was another guy that flew up my draft board just based on landing spot and draft capital alone. He was the RB8 in my pre-draft rankings, so he does come quite a bit up the board here to my RB4. And I think he's an absolute steal where he is in drafts right now. If you're getting him into the mid to late second round, you should be gobbling up as much Roshon Johnson as you possibly can. I mean, this guy is so freaking talented, but it was just never on display. He was stuck behind Bijan Gibbs, who rightfully so was the better back. But Roshon, 6'2", 222 pounds. He's a guy that can sustain in between the tackle contact. He can sustain runs. He's very hard to take down. Arm tackles aren't going to bring him down. He can really power his way to the second level of the defense and really pick up yards. I believe he is very, very underrated. He's a guy that people are saying if he stayed in college one more year, if he transferred out to a different school, he would have been viewed in the NFL as like a top 5 back. Obviously, I view him here as a top 5 back in the class, but he was, I believe, the 7th running back picked, or 6th or 7th running back picked in this class. So a guy that I think just being undervalued and underappreciated based on being behind the greatest running back since Saquon Barkley. But also the landing spot with the Bears, I think, is impeccable for Roshon. They have Khalil Herbert, who he's been a career backup. He hasn't exactly has the height, weight, power, and the explosivity that Roshon has. And I think Roshon can come in. He'll be a backup to Khalil Herbert from the onset, but I think he comes in and he'll take over that RB1 spot maybe week 5, week 6 of his first season. He will be one of those impact rookies that's going to, the same way Dameon Pierce exploded onto the scene in rookie drafts as the preseason went on, the same way that he won people a lot of leagues with some dominant performances in the middle of the season. Roshon's going to do the same. I anticipate him to, elevate to that RB1 status in the Bears offense pretty quickly. And I think in an offense that is built around running with Justin Fields as a running quarterback, Roshon's going to have plenty of opportunity. I think he's going to be an absolute killer asset for fantasy and a tremendous value for where he's being picked right now. So, and now we get back to my pre-draft ranking running back 3, Zach Charbonnet. He falls all the way down to running back 5 in my post-draft rankings. And Pete Carroll, man, what are you doing? You just stepped on the hearts, on the throats, on the souls of Geno Smith managers, of DK Metcalf managers, of people targeting JSN, of Kenneth Walker managers. This was just such an embarrassment of riches that you had to come in and people thought, maybe they're going to let Geno Smith cook a little bit more. They brought in a third capable wide receiver in Jackson Smith-Njigba, but nope. Still the epitome of the mantra for Pete Carroll in Seattle is going to be run the ball. So he brings in Zach Charbonnet alongside, honestly, a top 5 running back for Dynasty and Kenneth Walker, completely eviscerating Kenneth Walker's value. I mean, Maybe I drop Zach here a little bit because I am a Kenneth Walker owner and I'm a little bitter and salty about what Pete Carroll did to his value. But we know that Pete Carroll is going to run the ball. We know that Zach Charbonnet is a very competent running back. He's 6'1", 220. He's a very powerful back. There's a reason he was my running back 2 in the pre-draft rankings, just with the power and smoothness that he's able to accelerate and break away from tackles and just create plays in the open field. I think we're going to see, he's not going to be the top 10 fantasy asset. He's not going to be a top 10 running back, but I think he comes in. He's a very solid RB2. He will get his fair share of workload. He will be incorporated in the offense from week 1. I just, the upside on both Zach and Kenneth, and basically really any other asset within the Seahawks offense, was really kneecapped by this pick here in the second round. But, gets that second round draft capital, number 52 overall at the 21st spot in the second round. So, draft capital shows how much they value him. And he will get his fair share of targets and fair share of touches in this offense. Just don't expect a tremendous upside from Zach Charbonnet. That's why I have Roshon above him. I think Roshon has a higher upside and might have more volume than Zach Charbonnet will have this coming year. All right. Running back 6 is going to be De'Von Achane. Where is this man? Right here. He was in the running back 7 in my pre-draft rankings, move ups 1 spot to running back 6. And he went to the absolute perfect landing spot for him. I mean, there is going to be a lot of landing spots. I wouldn't be able to know how to use De'Von Achane with his skill set. Obviously, he was a track star in high school. He has that insane 4.2 speed. Didn't show it at the combine, but people have said that it was a bad showing for him, and his 4.2 speed has been on display many, many, many times. He's a very undersized back at 5'9", 185. And in most running schemes, most power running schemes, that wouldn't have worked very well. But with the Dolphins, man, this is the absolute perfect spot for him. They're a team that is built on speed. They already have Raheem Mostert in there, who's one of the fastest running backs. They have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, 2 of the fastest wide receivers. This is a team that, they live by the mantra speed kills, and I think they're going to be able to find plenty of good uses for De'Von Achane. He's going to be a little inconsistent, unfortunately, just the way most Dolphins assets were last year, where you'd have these big blow-up games from Waddle and Tyreek and Raheem Mostert, and then the next weekend they'd made like 4, 3, maybe 5 points. So his consistency leaves a lot to be desired, which is why I have him ranked number 6 behind Zach Charbonnet. But I think for swinging for the upside, and the upside weeks on De'Von Achane are going to be, week winning type weeks. And again, I would have honestly dropped him maybe even out of the top 10 if he goes to a different situation. But because he goes to the Dolphins in the perfect situation, I'm very happy taking him at the beginning of the second. I think in a super flex at the end of the first round, I think it's a little rich for my blood with De'Von Achane. I don't think the consistency is there to waste a first round pick on him. I would try, if someone's really keen on him, I'd try to trade back with them. I think there's more value to be accrued. So I think De'Von Achane's draft capital, a little rich for where I want to take him at right now. All right, moving on to our running back 7 is going to be Tyjae Spears. Great landing spot. Really, really great landing spot for Tyjae Spears. So much I can talk about. I'm going to try to keep it brief, but I could talk for hours about Tyjae, the pros and the cons, because there are pros and cons to weigh here. First, he goes in, obviously the Hassan Haskins experiment last year did not work. He's probably going to be shipped off on an ice floe here very soon. Tyjae Spears comes in as the immediate backup to Derrick Henry. Now, there's a lot of upside with that because, Derrick Henry, there's trade rumors. At one point, he was at plus 400 Vegas odds to go beyond the Eagles this year. I don't think it is entirely out of the possibility to move on from Derrick Henry before the season or even at the trade deadline. And I am very, very confident that Derrick Henry will not be on the team next year, promoting Tyjae to the RB1 spot. He's a very, very clear and palpable path to the RB1 spot on this team, a team that does like to run the ball. Also, he does have great pass catching chops. Again, we saw it on display at the Senior Bowl, not in the ways that, are probably going to be translatable to the NFL, but he can run routes, he can take balls out of the backfield, and he has very good hands for a running back. And especially with, I think, them drafting Will Levis made me a little bit higher on Tyjae Spears, just because Will Levis, despite having a cannon of an arm, really does not have a huge big time throw rate. Where he excels is short to intermediate passes, and I think the Will Levis to Tyjae Spears connection, not this year, but next year, is going to be something that's going to reap a lot of fantasy points. Now, my concerns with Tyjae Spears. Because if that was just what I had to talk about, he would be much higher in my rankings, probably a top 5 running back for me. However, he's 7. Why? Well, offensive line in Tennessee needs a major overhaul. Obviously, they got rid of Taylor Lewan. They brought in Andre Dillard, but they really didn't do much outside of Peter Skoronski to address the offensive line. So there's still some question marks about what type of line he's going to be running behind. And obviously, we know that the offensive line is very indicative of the type of success the run game can have, and also the insane injury concerns about Tajay Spears. You can't talk about Tajay Spears without talking about his multiple knee injuries. Apparently, one of his knees is so banged up that he has absolutely zero cartilage in his knee, and he's also had 2 ACL surgeries to the point where one of his knees does not have an ACL anymore. Obviously, these are 2 things that are very concerning. I don't know. These are rumors, and I don't know how much I truly believe them. From one, draft capital alone, he was drafted in the 3rd round, in the middle of the 3rd round with the 81st pick overall, 18th pick of the 3rd round. So clearly the Titans organization, an organization that, historically has been good about doing their due diligence on injured players, they had confidence that the knees weren't going to be a problem. And as someone who also does not have any cartilage in one of my knees, and knowing how painful that is, I saw the highlight from senior camp. Everyone knows what I'm talking about, where he ducks under and absolutely breaks away for that pass and takes it to the house. You can't make that move if you don't have cartilage in your knee. I promise you, he would have been rolling on the ground in pain. So I don't think his injury concerns are as extreme as people are making them out to be, but there's probably a grain of truth to every rumor. So something to be concerned about. Moving on to my running back 8 is going to be Tank Bigsby, a guy who really fell quite hard for me. In my pre-draft rankings, he was the running back 4, and now he is the running back 8. Basically flip-flopped with Roshon Johnson, who went from 8 to 4. But with Tank Bigsby, he goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars in the 3rd round, so he does get that day 2 draft capital, 88th overall, pick 25 in the 3rd round. I just don't know if I really like the landing spot here. You're going behind Travis Etienne, who showed that he was capable of quite a significant workload last year, came back from that Liz Frank injury. They traded away James Robinson with how much confidence they did have in Travis Etienne. And I think Tank Bigsby is going to be relegated to a perennial RB2 role. I mean, think about more of a Khalil Herbert, Alexander Madison type outlook for Tank Bigsby. And that's why I have him so far down. I can't really get behind, using 2nd round draft capital on a Khalil Herbert or an Alexander Madison. And that's really what Tank Bigsby's value represents to me at this moment in the Jacksonville Jaguars offense. If they have a change of heart and decide to move on from Travis Etienne in 2 years, or if his injury concerns kind of spark up again, then maybe Tank Bigsby's value could skyrocket a little bit. But right now in the 2nd round, it's a pretty rich landing spot for what I anticipate Tank Bigsby to be. Don't really have too much to say on him outside of that. I mean, I think he's a tremendously skilled player. Just go back and watch my pre-draft analysis of him. But the landing spot, I think, was very indicative of his utilization. Number 9, we're going to go with Chase Brown, running back out of Illinois, the Canadian. Goes in the 5th round, so day 3 draft capital, not very high draft capital. And in my pre-draft rankings, he was unranked, but again, going to the Bengals, I think, is a very, very good landing spot. There's been a lot of turmoil with Joe Mixon, both his on-field performance and his off-field antics, getting in trouble with the law multiple times this offseason. So we don't know. Again, it could be a very similar situation to Alvin Kamara, where per the NFLPA, in the contracts, they can completely indemnify the contract if there is any sort of felony or felony misdemeanor. So as soon as rulings will be handled down because the aggravated intimidation, I believe, is the case that was reopened against Joe Mixon. As soon as the charges come down, the Bengals could cut ties with him, which was frankly something they wanted to do for on-field performance regardless, and it just could give them a very, very easy out and move forward with Chase Brown. I don't think the Chris Evans experiment lasted very well, so Chase Brown has a pretty palpable road to the field this year. It's just with the 5th round draft capital that Chase Brown has, I just don't see a long-term outlook for Chase to be relevant for the Bengals. I think if they do happen to move on from Joe Mixon this year, they come back next year and spend, maybe day 2 capital on a Raheem Sanders out of Arkansas or some guy like that. And then Chase Brown becomes the guy that had a great year, was very high, and then just got absolutely eviscerated the next year. We're talking like James Robinson, Michael Carter, guys like that. So I think in the third round, if you're going to compete this year, Chase Brown is a guy that I think is worth it to take a shot on. But if you're looking into make an investment for the future, I would probably steer clear of Chase Brown at this point. Wide receiver 10 is going to be Sean Tucker. Obviously, quite the fall for Sean because he goes as a UDFA. Apparently, not only were there injury concerns around the foot injury prior to the draft, but apparently he has major heart concerns, and that some teams have written him completely off the board due to that alone. He may not be able to ever play football or step foot on a football field. However, at this point, he's my RB10. You're looking at him in either the 4th round or as a UDF, picking him up in the UDFA in your rookie drafts, and might as well take the shot on him. What's the floor is that he never plays for you, and you just drop him into the preseason or at the start of the season. And the ceiling is he's a very capable pass catcher for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, even as a UDFA, they didn't invest really in any other running backs, and they got rid of Leonard Fournette. And unless they bring in someone else or they bring back Leonard, it's going to be Rachaad White as a primary back, and then Sean Tucker slots in as an RB2. I mean, and we saw him at Syracuse. This is a guy that, his fall from grace has been rapid and severe, but he was talked about as a first-round fantasy pick only just a year ago with how talented he was, how athletic he was. He had, 4.3, low 4.3 speed. And obviously, he was hurt by A, the news of the heart condition, B, not being able to test prior to the draft, but he's went to a good situation. There's a very palpable road to the field and with true fantasy production. And if you're telling me I can pick up a guy in the 4th round that his most likely outcome is an RB2 on Tampa Bay Buccaneers, then yeah, I'm more than happy to spend some 4th round draft capital, because I mean, what else are you going to do? These are guys that normally are cut by the time the season rolls around. So in the 4th round, I'm very, very happy with Sean Tucker. That's going to wrap up. Those are my top 10. Just to recap, number 1, obviously, is Bijan Robinson. Jahmyr Gibbs moves up from 3 to 2. Kendrick Miller moves up from 6 all the way to my RB3 post-draft. Roshon Johnson moves up from 8 to 4. Very, very high on Roshon. Very, very high. I'm taking him in basically every draft I'm in. Zach Charbonnet. Pete Carroll just took him out at the knees, and he drops from 2 in my pre-draft rankings to 5. Devin A-Chain is now the 6th running back. Obviously goes to that great landing spot in Miami, the perfect landing spot for him. Number 7, Tajay Spears. Number 8, Tank Bigsby. And we round it out with Chase Brown to the Bengals and Sean Tucker landing with the Bucks. Couple UDFAs I want to draft here, or a couple honorable mentions. Dwayne McBride out of UAB. I mean, he goes... Again, it's a very similar situation that we're talking about with Chase Brown with Chase Brown, Joe Mixon, and the Bengals. The Minnesota Vikings are a team that have talked quite a bit about moving off of Dalvin Cook. There's been contemplated trades of him to the Broncos, or potentially him being cut. Alexander Mattison is there, but Dwayne McBride comes in, and he wasn't UDFA. He came in the 7th round, so they actually spent draft capital on him. Obviously, he's not very impactful draft capital, but same way that Chase Brown, if something doesn't happen to the incumbent stalwart, whether it's Joe Mixon or Dalvin Cook, Dwayne McBride has a very palpable road to production this year. Will most likely get replaced next year, but if you're a competing team, pick him up as UDFA, pick him up in the 4th round. He could be, as injuries start to mount later on in the season, he's a guy that could probably come in and produce as you make a push for the playoffs. And also, I just got to shout out Deuce Vaughn. Like, I love this dude. I mean, he's so productive. I mean, again, one of the smallest guy to measure in at the combine, I think, in the history of the combine. It says 5'6" here. He really measured in at like 5'5" and 3/4. The dude is so tiny, but the man just produces. He just produces. Back-to-back 1,300-yard seasons at Kansas State. He's a great pass catcher. He goes to the Cowboys, who didn't invest in any other running back capital. They haven't brought back Zeke. We'll see if they make any other pending free agent moves, but they have Tony Pollard. I think Deuce Vaughn, sneaky guy. Pick him up as a UDFA. I like him a lot. I love the moxie. He has that dog in him, as the youth likes to say around Twitter these days. But that's going to be it for my running back rankings. Very spicy takes. Let me know if you agree, disagree, what you think of my takes down in the comments below, and stick around for one more. We got one more, tight end position, the tight end group to go through, so we'll be doing that next. So stick around for that. And as always, take care.